Amen. Well, hello. This feels strange, being up here with this mic instead of one on a boom without an instrument. My name's Joseph, for those of you who I may not have had a chance to meet yet. I'm the worship minister here, and so being in this role still, I don't know, it feels a little odd, but I'm going to do my best. Seth is off this Sunday. He's off with the family. Whenever the worship minister preaches, I know people assume like, oh, we're going to talk about worship. And if you thought that for step 11, you'd be right. But maybe not in the way that you may think, because step 11 is more about prayer. And a lot of times we dissociate those things. We say, there's worship, and there's prayer, and there's teaching, and there's all these discrete things, but it's really all a lot more connected. And we're going to talk about that a little bit today. Let's start with just looking at what step 11 says. If you've not been with us, we're going through this series called Nothing Changes If Nothing Changes. We're looking at the spirituality of the 12 steps, and this is step 11. AA says it like this: we sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understand Him, of His will for us, and the power to carry that out. Celebrate Recovery says it like this: we sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. And they kind of append the first half of Colossians 3:16 to that, which says, let the word of Christ dwell in you richly. Do you ever find yourself in a place mentally, emotionally, and spiritually where you just find yourself very drained, right? You just really need to decompress and unplug and disconnect. Many of us, I know, have been feeling that way lately in the midst of a global pandemic that led to an economic shutdown and high-profile incidents of violence that have led to other high-profile incidents of violence and more destruction and oh yeah, it's an election year, right? There's a lot happening that makes us feel drained right now. I know that's where I was feeling. And because God is loving and merciful, a couple of weeks ago we got to take a family vacation, which was much, much needed. We go to this cabin it's literally on the banks of the New River in Virginia. When we're driving there, we're going up Interstate 77, and we can either get off of Interstate 77 and take this really beautiful, picturesque, winding mountain road to this cabin along the banks of the river, or we can go past that and get onto Interstate 81 and get off at a different exit and take a beautiful, picturesque, windy mountain road to the cabin. But it's beautiful. We go through and you're driving through the valley. You actually cross over the New River at one point, and so you get this nice vista both to the left and right of this big kind of valley where this river sits. And we go onto the cabin, and we turn off the road, and the road is like at the level of the roof of the cabin. So it's this real steep downhill, and we pull in next to the cabin. The cabin actually faces away from the road. They were smart in the way they built it. They wanted it to face the river, which is a much better picture. And so you go around and you go up the steps at the front of the cabin, and you turn around, and there's just like 40 or 50 yards of beautiful mountain bluegrass, some trees down by the river. There's a big rope swing that hangs from one of the trees, and our kids love to swing up there. And then just past that is the river. And I love it. It's this great time every single time we get to go there, of spending time with my wife Michelle's family, of reading, of fishing, of watching movies, creating memories. There's a state park nearby with a lake. We go there and we swim, and sometimes we rent a boat. And by happenstance, it's also the general area where my mom grew up. So we go up there, and it's like going home. It's amazing. I love it. We get to see some of my family. This time around, we actually drove up the mountain where my mom grew up, and we got to see, some of the places that I grew up going to around the holidays. It was awesome. It was such a great vacation. And again, because of all that has happened this year, all the stuff I already mentioned, plus we had a second child since the last time we were there, I just really, really needed to get away. It was becoming more and more difficult to appear normal instead of appearing withdrawn and spacing out and just trying to escape mentally. And so we started this series about the spirituality of the 12 steps, and I had also started reading a book that I'm going to talk a little bit more about tomorrow on the Welcome to Monday. It's called Get Your Life Back. That's about like spiritual habits and that kind of thing. And I was able, going into this vacation, to have a spiritual practice in place that was new in my life, that was very simple but very effective in being able to kind of recenter myself. And so we're going to talk about that today. It's centered around prayer, so we're going to spend a minute or two talking about what prayer is before we get there. So normal, one would hope, logical thinking is the way that most of us process life all the time. We take in information, we run it through a matrix of our own hopes and our fears and our desires and all of this kind of stuff, and it spits out a course of action or reaction that ideally makes sense to us and to the people around us in our lives. It's our default processing system to such an extent that most of us don't realize that there might be another way to process life. It's what we call the first mind, the calculating mind. That's what we'll call it today. The calculating mind sees everything through the lens of its own hurts, its own angers, needs, memories, wants. And because of that, it's too small to see anything truthfully or wisely or deeply. People living in this space don't see things as they are, they see things as they are. We'll put that on the screen so you can see the points of emphasis. People who are living out of the calculating mind don't see things as they are, they see things as they are. Right? And we know this is true. Right? This is how for 2,000 years, Christians have more or less had exactly the same Bible, but we've come to some very different conclusions about things. Right? Things that to us don't seem to make that much of a difference, like how often we take communion. Right? Bible-believing Christians read the Bible and think you should take communion every single time we gather. Other Bible-believing Christians read the same Bible and come to a different conclusion. We do it with infant baptism. We do it with, should we baptize babies or should we wait till people are adults? There's all sorts of issues where we read the exact same thing and come to different conclusions. Why? It's because we're reading the Bible as we are, not as it is most of the time. We're reading our own beliefs, our own preconceptions into it. And this is not a malicious thing. This is just how people function, right? So even when the calculating mind prays, it prays this way, right? It's still a self-centered prayer. It's all about us. It's all about how things affect us. It's all about our own needs, hurts, perspective. Only now we're inviting God into that to help move us towards a predetermined conclusion. In this way of praying, we pour our heart out to God. We lay everything out, and then we ask God to fill our minds with hope, with assurance, with insight and answers and knowledge, something that we can hold on to. All right, this way of praying pours our heart out and asks God to fill our mind. Prayer, the way we see it in Scripture a lot, invites us into a different way of processing things, a different thinking cap, if you want to use that kind of language, a different set of software and parameters to process things by. A way to see things as they are and not just as we are. The most famous prayer, most likely, I would say is from Matthew 6. We call it the Lord's Prayer. This is Jesus teaching in the Sermon on the Mount. And he says this, you know it. He says, "This then is how you should pray. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we also have forgiven our debtors. And do not bring us to the time of trial, but rescue us from the evil one." You see, this prayer, just as a model for how to pray, is brilliant because it follows a really good formula for helping prayer not be all about us, right? It's basically, our Father in heaven, right? So we're talking about who God is. Hallowed be your name. May your name be made holy. So we're saying, God, I want to reorient myself towards you in worship. Your kingdom come, right? So your glory, your honor, your dominion, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. So it's this moment of like stepping out of the way and going, it's not about what I want. It's about what you want. Then this prayer moves on to give us this day our daily bread. There are lots of interesting, fun little rabbit holes we could go down with that phrase, but they all sort of lead in the same direction, which is it's a prayer for physical sustenance, physical salvation, right? Give us the things we need to survive. And then he moves on. Forgive us our debts as we also have forgiven our debtors. Do not bring us to the time of trial, but rescue us from the evil one. That's spiritual salvation, spiritual nourishment. So it's who God is, orienting ourselves towards God, stepping out of the way of what God wants, and then saying, God, meet my physical needs, meet my spiritual needs. Do you notice how little of that prayer is focused on the self? How little of that is focused on I. Compare that to the way most of us commonly pray. I won't even lump you into this. I'll say the way that I normally pray. I'll say, God, thank you for this day, because it's important not to sound needy right out of the gate, right? God, we thank you for all the good things that you bless us with, because it can't hurt to double down on the thanks, right? We pray for you to move in whatever situation, right? Because God, be present and move in this situation sounds better than, God, give me what I want. And again, this is not even like a malicious self-centeredness, because what I want might be for my friend who's sick to be healthy. But the simple fact of saying, God, move in this situation, what I'm really saying is, God, I want my friend to be healthy, so give me what I want, please. God, be with insert person, insert situation, insert issue, because we're saying, God, even though it's not self-centered, what I really, really want is what I want. Give me what I want. And keep us safe and healthy and comfortable. Oops, I didn't mean to say comfortable. Oh, probably shouldn't have said that. But I really want to be comfortable, so please make me comfortable, God. Right? That's how we pray a lot of times. And what Jesus is saying here is that, like, true prayer in the deepest sense is a shifting of perspective. It's not just, God, from where I stand, these are the things that I think needs to happen. Tell me what you think. It's, God, help me to see things as they are and not just as I am. It moves us away from an egocentric, self-centric way of praying to one that's more soul-centric. We will call this the second mind, the contemplative mind. This moves our perspective from ego to soul. It invites us to see a bigger picture than our self-centered mind can handle. We begin to see not just how we are affected by circumstances, but how our lives affect others. It invites us to see things as they are, not just as we are. It invites us not to pour out our heart and ask God to fill our mind, but to release our mind and ask God to fill our heart with his heart, with his will, with the things that he cares about, with his love, with his presence. It's about letting go of some things, the way that we're seeing things, and inviting God to help us see things as they truly are. St. Augustine, the 4th and 5th century theologian and bishop, said it like this: "Thou must be emptied of that wherewith thou art full, that thou mayest be filled with that whereof thou art empty." I love that you guys thought I seriously wanted you to hear it that way. That's what he wrote. What he meant was, we have to empty ourselves of the things that we're full of so that we can be filled up with the things we're empty of. If we want to be full of God's will, knowledge of his will, the power to carry it out, if we want to be filled with God's love, we have to let go of some things. We have to empty ourselves when we're full of it. One of the tenets of AA and other 12-step groups is, it works if you work it. It works if you work it. Meaning, if you really want this, working these steps will put you on the path to get there. If you want to improve your conscious contact with God, your knowledge of God's will for your life, and the power to carry it out, it will involve moving from the first mind, the calculating mind, to the second mind, the contemplative mind. So the question is, how do we do this? How do we make this switch? How do we move from processing the world through our ego to processing the world through a more soul-focused way of doing things? There are, conservative estimate here, there are about 1 million different personality tests out there. If you're in the corporate world at all, you've probably taken a Briggs-Myers assessment, maybe a DISC analysis. You've probably taken a StrengthsFinders test. More recently, the Enneagram is one that's kind of gaining in popularity both inside the church and outside the church. And then, of course, like the internet age has given us BuzzFeed. And, which Lord of the Rings character are you? I am Éomer. Which pasta dish sums up your personality? Apparently, I'm fettuccine Alfredo. I'll take it. And then one that I found, this one it cracked me up. It was, choose between these beverages to find out if you're Beyonce or Rihanna. I am Beyonce, always. Another way of thinking through people is to think of people as doers, thinkers, or feelers. Right now, we all do each of these things. We all do things, we all think things, we all feel things. But all of us have a primary way that we kind of process life. So like, if you're the type to pack an entire week's worth of vacation, full to the brim with activities, day trips, meals with friends, all that kind of stuff, you're probably a doer, right? Doers set goals, they make schedules, they create to-do lists. Doers need to be in motion, they need to be in action, they need to feel like they are accomplishing something at nearly all times. Doers experience the world through the gut, right, at the instinct level. If you're the type that never meets a stranger, who could talk about anything to anyone for any length of time, you're probably a feeler, right? Feelers experience the world through intense emotional connections, right? They have to be with people, they need to be around people, connected with people, or they feel malnourished. They take in and experience the world through their heart. Thinkers, of which I consider myself one, if you're the type who would rather read a book than do much outdoor stuff, or who would rather have a deeply intellectually challenging conversation than make even 1 minute of small talk with someone you've just met, you might be a thinker, right? Thinkers tend to process the world out loud. You might find a thinker talking through multiple sides of an issue completely to themselves, very much out loud. That's just how we roll. Their inner monologue is a constant companion, whether or not real people are around. They take in and experience the world through the mind. So just as we are all doers, thinkers, and feelers, but we have one that's dominant, we all need these 3 things I'm about to talk through. But if you're a doer, a thinker, or a feeler, you need one of them more than the other. Let's start with stillness. Right, stillness, releasing the need to achieve. This is for the doers. Right, we are often moving so fast from one thing to another in life that we don't have a chance to process it. Right, we're moving mentally, physically, bam, 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 one thing to the next. We don't have time to slow down and feel anything. And the result is we end up with like one emotional state most of the time, which is this sort of hazy, haggard feeling of being on. You know what I'm talking about? In the room here, I'm seeing some doers like smile. They know what I'm talking about. We wake up and we're on because we've got to get the kids up and get them ready. Then we're on because we've got to make breakfast and get ourselves ready. We're on because we've got to get to the commute and get to the job. We're on for that meeting first thing when we walk in the door. And we're on for the meeting right after that, and the one after that, for the rest of the day. We're on when we get home so that we can spend a little bit of time with the kids before dinner. We're on for making dinner. We're on for getting the kids ready for bed and in bed. We're on for whatever sort of quality time we might have with our spouse after that, or with friends or whatever. And so we get to the end of the day and we realize that there wasn't really any margin for anything other than being on all day long, day after day, week after week, year after year. When asked what the greatest commandment was, Jesus said this. This is from Mark 12. He said, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. The second commandment is this, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no other commandment greater than these. Loving our neighbor is clearly a very essential part of the Christian life, but it's that qualifier, as yourself, that's lost on a lot of us, isn't it? Because Jesus is pretty direct and matter of fact about this comparison. He says, you treat people like you treat yourself. And most of us, if we're honest, would admit that if we treated everybody in our lives the way we treat ourselves, we wouldn't be a very good neighbor, would we? Loving our neighbor is important. Loving ourselves is equally important. The difficult truth we don't want to admit is this. You will, the way you treat your own heart is the way you will end up treating everyone else's heart. You can fake it for a while. You can try to be amazing to everybody else while still being super hard on yourself, demanding the world of yourself. You will eventually begin treating everyone in your life like you treat yourself. Doers need stillness most of all. Because doers are constantly going and striving and achieving, it's easy for them to fall into the trap of thinking that growing closer to God, deepening that connection, improving their conscious connection with God, is going to come through some sensational experience or some big achievement. I have good news for you, doers. That's not the case. Not even close. Life is built on the dailies. It's built on little stuff like holding hands with somebody you care about, getting coffee with a friend, doing the dishes, cutting the grass, just being in the same room with somebody while you do something together. That's what life is. It's not the big experiences, the once-in-a-lifetime things that you get to do and take pictures of and look back at. That's not what makes your life. What makes your life is the boring stuff, to be honest. So if you're a doer, you need stillness and the space to ask yourself and God questions like, what's the pace you're currently demanding of yourself? Would you be comfortable asking the same pace of people you really care about? How do you talk to yourself? Is it harsh? Is your inner voice mean to you? Is it unforgiving? Doers need to be able to release the need to achieve and show kindness towards themselves. Let's talk about the thinkers. As I said, this is me, I think. The people who work with me say yes. Because thinkers tend to take in information from a ton of different sources and process it internally and dialogue about it internally and externally. And because in 21st century Western life, we are absolutely swamped with input from just about every source you can imagine. And especially because thinkers tend to feel like because we take in and process all this input, that it's our place to respond to all of it. Thinkers need to learn to unplug. Simple unplugging is often what we need. I was able to do this for myself when we were on our vacation a couple of weeks ago. As soon as we got out of the neighborhood, I handed the phone to my wife and I said, would you please delete the following apps? Email, Facebook Messenger. And then throughout the week, as notifications would pop up, I would just go and disable notifications for those apps. It was great. I went like 4 days without my phone making any noise. Awesome. It was the best. It was the best. I'm not normally that out of touch, even on vacation, but I told people here before I left, I need to be that out of touch for this one. So we're just like, we're deluged with input all the time. But as I said, what makes thinkers different is that we tend to seek it out. We tend to look for it. We thrive off constant input, thinkers do. And so when we find ourselves in moments of quiet, nature abhors a vacuum, as they say. As soon as there's a moment of quiet, thinkers are looking for a voice to fill that space. We don't like the quiet. So we turn on the TV. We pull out our phones. We play a game. There's this constant barrage. And recent studies have shown for many Americans, it's as much as 10 hours a day of media. Over 100,000 words. That's a lot of words. That's a very long novel, 100,000 words. Over 34 gigabytes of information every single day. And it has literally restructured our brains to the point where we don't like being asked to focus on things for any length of time. And some of us have even lost the ability to focus on things for very long. You've experienced this, I promise. Somebody sends you a link to a video on YouTube or Facebook. And you're like, oh, okay, I know this person, I like their taste. Let me see what they got. 4 minutes! Is this worth 4 minutes of my time? Like, should I really watch this whole video? Maybe I can leave it on in the background and just listen while I do something else. Maybe it's just not even worth my time. 4 minutes, ooh. But the problem is, it's not just deep, reasoned thinking that requires a calm and attentive mind. Right? Psychologists and brain scientists, they've been studying our lower order emotions for a long, long time. Stuff like fear, right? The fight or flight instinct and all that. We know a lot about that. It's only more recently they've turned their attention to higher order emotions, things like empathy and compassion. What they're finding is that these higher order emotions, the things that we would all say we strive for, we want to have empathy and compassion and kindness and all that stuff, those things typically emerge from neural processes that are, to quote one researcher, inherently slow. To put it another way, empathy takes a minute. It takes a minute to get there. We have to be able to think about it and focus. I'm going to go out on a limb a little bit here. And again, I'm not going to lump anybody in with me. I'll just speak from my own perspective. But I have noticed that the death of George Floyd seems to have made more of an impact on me emotionally and just the way it's affected my outlook on some things, more so than other killings of unarmed people. Why George Floyd? Why not Michael Brown? Why not Tamir Rice, who was 12 years old? Why not Freddie Gray? Why not Philando Castile? Michelle and I lived in the Charleston, South Carolina area when Walter Scott was running away from a police officer and was shot 8 times in the back. Why not Walter Scott? Why not Eric Harris, Eric Garner, Terrence Crutcher, Laquan McDonald, Breonna Taylor, Tanisha Anderson, Akai Gurley, Sean Reed? Trayvon Martin was killed 15 minutes from where we sit right now. And please don't think I'm trying to be high and mighty. I'm not trying to guilt anybody. I had to look up a lot of those names. And my guess is that not all of them are ringing a bell for all of us either. The point I'm trying to make is that maybe, just maybe, this one has opened my eyes more because I've been more stuck at home. I've had to slow down. I've been stuck more at home because of coronavirus, like most of us. Perhaps I've been paying more attention this time around because I don't have quite as much stuff to distract me as I normally do. Thinkers need silence, most of all. We need to learn to unplug and quiet the voices and to release the need to have an answer for it all. Because we tend to process life and the world around us through our minds, we can fall into the trap, thinkers, of thinking that deepening our conscious contact with God is going to come through some important discovery that we make or some big fact that we learn. And just like with doers, this is not even close. And that's good news. Thinkers need silence so that we can learn to hear the voice of God again and differentiate it from all the other voices that we're engaging with. And then we have the feelers. Have you ever noticed that Jesus has this amazing ability to just up and walk away from his entire world? Right here in the first chapter of Mark, there's excitement building. Jesus has called his disciples. He's cast out a demon. He's healed a bunch of people. There's crowds swelling around him. And Jesus just leaves. This is from Mark 1, 35 to 38. In the morning, while it was still very dark, he, being Jesus, got up and went out to a deserted place, and there he prayed. And Simon and his companions hunted for him. When they found him, they said to him, "Everyone's searching for you." He answered, "Hey, let's get out of here. Let's go somewhere else." It is extremely difficult for feelers to disentangle themselves from the rest of their world. Feelers, tell me if this sounds familiar. You're running late. You text your boss a gentle explanation of what happened. The car broke down, my kid's sick, I had to, whatever. But I got it worked out, I'm on my way in. And your boss just sends back a one-word reply, "Okay." Now, you're not an obsessive person, feelers, but you find yourself wondering about the subtext of that single word. Man, one word? Ooh, what does that mean? Is my boss mad? One word feels like my boss might be mad. They didn't say, "Oh gosh, I'm sorry to hear that about your car. I'm sorry, I hope your child feels better. Be safe, get here when you can." They didn't say that. They just said, "Okay." But maybe they were driving and they just pulled up to a stoplight and okay was all they could get out, safely at a stoplight. Wow, but what if they're really upset? Oh my goodness. Maybe they've been upset for a while. Oh gosh, I should look through some old conversations and try to see if there's this kind of subtext in those conversations too. Man, oh my goodness, maybe the whole relationship is broken. Maybe I should update my resume. Oh. The feelers in the room are like itching right now, just hearing this scenario described. Feelers know this. And feelers also know, whether or not they can do anything about it, that all this worrying and over-processing, it's emotional junk. It's emotional junk. It's like the stuff that accumulates in that one drawer in your kitchen. Our souls accumulate junk, just like that drawer does. It's like a magnet. And so feelers need to learn this idea of benevolent detachment, of getting untangled, stepping out of the quagmire, getting some healthy distance. We call it benevolent attachment because it's not cynical, right? It's not hopeless resignation. It's not saying everything's terrible, so why even bother? Right? That's not what we're talking about. What we're saying is that in order to be healthy, in order to be able to receive what God is trying to give us, in order to be able to increase our conscious contact with God, we have to let go of these unhealthy connections and entanglements. The simple fact is that we cannot care about everything and everyone all the time. There's not enough of us to go around, which is why so many of us feel so massively overburdened, and we're looking for some way to lighten this really heavy emotional load that we carry. People are desperately seeking the feeling of being carefree. About all the ways we've created to escape and dissociate, right? We do it chemically through alcohol and drugs. We do it through technology and social media, video games, virtual reality. We do it through destructive relationships. We do it by pouring ourselves so into a hobby in our spare time that it begins to affect everything that's not our spare time, right? When feelers learn to detach themselves from life and reconnect with God regularly, if they don't do that, they can easily fall into these types of behaviors. Feelers especially have to learn that there's just not enough of you to go around, and that's okay. Feelers need solitude most of all, so that they can learn to benevolently detach themselves from life's problems and release the need to connect with everything. Feelers need to hear and understand and internalize the words of Jesus when he said, this is Matthew 11:28, "Come to me, all you that are weary and carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest." Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. There's your carefree spirit. There's your feeling of being carefree. Jesus says, come to me. You're weary, you're heavy burdened, I'll give you rest. So, there's a spiritual practice I want to give you today. It's one that can help doers, thinkers, and feelers alike. It's one that I've been doing for the last few weeks, going into my vacation a couple weeks ago, and it's been great. Like I feel like it's already been beneficial for me in terms of feeling more connected with God in a regular way. It's called the 1 minute pause. 1 minute pause. Super simple. We can all find a minute in our day. And the simple act of pausing can make a huge difference for each of us. So here's the practice. Here's how it works. At least once a day, but preferably 2 or 3 times a day, stop whatever you're doing. Right? That's stillness for the doers. Get by yourself. That's solitude for the feelers. And remove every distraction you can. That's silence for the thinkers. Focus on your breathing. Don't try to hold your breath or take super deep breaths or do anything crazy like that. Just pay attention to your breath and try to even it out and slow it down just a little bit. Out loud, if you have to, in order to help you focus, pray simple prayers that move beyond your calculating mind, your egocentric, your first mind, that's only concerned with your own needs and wants and perspectives and all that kind of stuff. And instead pray simple prayers that invite God's needs, wants, perspective to populate your inner self, your contemplative mind. I would like for us to actually do this together right now, if that's okay. So if you're watching online, I would encourage you, try to get some space between you and whoever you may be watching with. It might help to get where you can hear but not see the screen, because screens tend to be distracting for us. If you've got something beautiful in nature outside your window that you can look at it. For those of you in the room, you're probably just going to need to close your eyes, but that's okay. And as we close our eyes, as we get ourselves into this space, focus on your breathing. Again, nothing crazy. Don't hold your breath. Don't start taking extra deep breaths. Just focus on your breath. Listen to these words and pray these words along with me. Jesus, I give everyone and everything to you. I give everyone and everything to you, God. I give myself to you for union with you. I am created for union with you, God. I give everything in me for union with you. I need more of you, God. Fill me with more of you. I love you. I believe you. I worship you. Heal and restore our union, God. Fill me with more of you. I pray that the river of life would fill me, restore me, renew me. Saturate me with your love, with your power, with your will, with your life. That's good, isn't it? Finding more of God, improving our conscious contact with Him, growing strong in soul and spirit, it requires creating space daily for God. To intentionally put ourselves in a place that allows us to draw upon and experience the healing power of God filling us. One of the catchphrases of AA is, it works if you work it. The 1-minute pause can help you reconnect with God if you truly want to, and if you work it. It requires a bit of stillness, a bit of silence, a bit of solitude. In the church world, a lot of times we call that sacred space. The Bible calls it Sabbath. If you create a little bit of sacred space, a little bit of Sabbath every day, God will meet you there, and you'll begin to love it.